Let me start by saying that I'm not a devil worshiper. I don't believe in or support the strange and unsettling things that happen in this town. I'm just a man who's found himself trapped in a terrible situation, though I'll get into that more later. I never intended to work in a place like this. In fact, I wasn't even born here. I stumbled into this town, let's call it Clydesville, in my early 20s while I was desperately searching for work. I was living in my parents' basement with a criminal justice degree, and, to be honest, the job market back home wasn't offering much. Then one day, I saw an ad in the local paper for a sheriff's deputy position in a small town. The offer seemed too good to ignore, offering a salary far better than anything I could find nearby. For most people, a move to the middle of nowhere would seem like a hard pass, but for me, a young single guy with limited prospects, it seemed like a godsend. I called the sheriff's office, and Sheriff Allen, who I would soon come to know was more than eager to have an interview, was quick to schedule it. A week later, I packed my bags and set off toward the unknown. The drive out there was disorienting. The roads seemed to wind in every direction, and to make matters worse, there was no service, so my GPS was useless. The more I drove, the more I felt like I was going in circles. But then, just as I was beginning to worry I was lost, I saw a small gas station and a few stretches of farmland. Finally, I spotted an old, rusted sign, "Welcome to Clydesville." I pulled up to the sheriff's office, a simple brick building tucked between two old stores. After a brief conversation with Alan, he hired me on the spot. I was set to start immediately, and he made it clear he'd be showing me the ropes for the next month, ensuring I'd get through the probationary period without issue. The first few weeks were quiet. Things seemed peaceful in Clydesville, almost too peaceful. Calls came in about missing dogs, kids pulling pranks, the usual small-town problems. Everyone knew everyone else, and soon I found myself learning names, faces, and the simple rhythms of small-town life. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was an odd tension that hung in the air, as if something just out of sight was waiting to reveal itself. It wasn't until around 6 weeks into the job that things started to get strange. By then, I had grown comfortable with the quiet routines, but that comfort shattered when Sheriff Allen radioed me. He asked me to meet him at the fields at the town's entrance. When I arrived, I opened my truck door, and the sight that met me was enough to make my stomach lurch. A family, tourists I assumed, lay sprawled across the grass, their bodies grotesquely torn apart. Their eyes, their tongues, all missing. I felt bile rise in my throat, and before I could stop myself, I vomited violently onto the dirt next to the truck. Alan was calm, disturbingly so. "Pull yourself together," he said. "We need to bag the bodies." His words felt cold, almost rehearsed. I helped him, choking back dry heaves as I worked. The whole thing felt surreal, like a nightmare that wouldn't end. But when it was over, Alan told me to head home for the day, assuring me that he would take care of the details. He told me not to worry, that he'd handle everything. I went home in a daze, trying to push the horrors of that afternoon out of my mind. But that night, I couldn't shake the questions that kept surfacing. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion. Alan never mentioned the case again, nor did I ever see him collect any evidence or conduct any investigation. When I finally mustered the courage to ask, he dismissed my concerns. "Don't worry about it," he said. "It's taken care of." Still, I couldn't let it go. Using the slow internet in my house, I searched for any clues about the family. I found pictures of missing persons that seemed to match them, but as soon as I clicked to open the page, my internet froze, just like it always did. I decided to let it go. After all, Sheriff Allen had everything under control, so I tried to get some rest, telling myself that the whole thing was probably just a freak accident, nothing to worry about. That night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. Before I could even process what was happening, a man slammed the butt of his shotgun into my face. Everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was tied up in the bed of a truck. I drifted in and out of consciousness, the rough jolting of the vehicle making me dizzy. When I finally came to, I found myself in a dark room. There was no sound except for the faint murmur of a conversation. Sheriff Allen's voice was unmistakable, but the other voice was unfamiliar. I strained to hear their words, trying to make sense of it all. "Alan, this is your fault," the other voice hissed. "If you'd trained your dog properly, he wouldn't be sniffing around in business that doesn't concern him." I'll be honest with you, at the time I didn't fully understand what I was getting into. But there, in the shadows of that dim room, the tension thickened as the voices continued. "I know," one voice, Alan's, said with a touch of desperation. "But I think we can save this one. He's not too far gone. With time, he'll learn." The other voice, cold and sharp, cut through the room like a blade. "No, you either train your dog tonight or you put him down. Simple as that." Alan tried to reason with him, his voice now laced with uncertainty. "Wait, we have to ease people into this sort of thing. We can't just expect him to cooperate all at once." The other voice, without hesitation, fired back. "If you can't handle this, then I will." Then the light in the room flicked on, casting harsh shadows across the walls. Standing there, framed in the doorway, was a man in a sharp suit. I recognized him immediately as Mayor Andrews. "Hello," he said with a grin that sent a chill down my spine. "I'm Mayor Andrews, and it seems you weren't trained properly, so I'll give it to you straight. Your job is simple. You're here to protect my town from the outside world, from people like you. Our people have strange needs that must be fulfilled. And those needs, well, they require blood, sacrifices, offerings." He took a step closer, and the weight of his words pressed down on me like a vice. "You have two choices," he continued, his voice low and unwavering. "You can continue to protect us, working alongside Alan, or you can become an offering yourself. But if you try to run, or if you lie to us in any way, we'll find you, and we'll make you watch as we slaughter your parents before offering their souls to our God." I know what you're thinking. Most people would say I should have walked away, right then and there. But what would you do? A young man, terrified, struggling to find a way out, with the weight of the town's horrors bearing down on him. I agreed to his terms, desperate to save my own life, to keep breathing for just a little longer. Mayor Andrews gave a knowing smile and shook my hand, as though he had just sealed a simple business deal. He turned to Alan then, his voice colder now. "Train him. Teach him how to protect us properly." It started with small tasks, things I could easily brush off as mundane. At first, it was about communicating with state authorities, making sure everything appeared normal, smooth on the surface. But Alan's training was different from what I expected. It wasn't about being a deputy. It was about seeing things in the town that no one else noticed, understanding the twisted code of life here. He taught me about the lamps. Every house in Clydesville had 2 lamps outside, one red, one amber, and each light meant something. When the amber light was on, it meant the family inside was in need of an offering. But on the night before the sacrifice, the amber light would turn red. And when everything went according to plan, the next day both lamps would be lit, signaling that we had to clean up the remains. The worst part? The cleaning. The bodies always looked wrong. They were pale, drained of all their blood, and twisted in unnatural ways. I never got used to it, but over time, you grow numb. You don't have a choice. Death and suffering become background noise. At first, Alan wouldn't let me escort the offerings to guard the entrance of the barn. But after a while, he relented. And that's when I saw it, the barn. The inside was cold, sterile, like a butcher's shop. Tile floors, shower heads with drains, and a dark altar in the center surrounded by candles. The screams? The worst part, without a doubt. But just like everything else, you get used to it. 10 years have passed since that first night. And somehow, life here isn't all that bad. I'm trusted now. I can use the internet freely. I even have luxuries, TV, phone calls with my parents. Life between offerings is quiet. The months pass with little to no interruptions. These days, Alan and I alternate who escorts the offerings. I only have to listen to the screams every 4 months. That is, until he was let go. Over the past year, things had started to unravel for Alan. He'd once been a steady, controlled presence in town, but the grip he had on everything slipped away, replaced by erratic behavior fueled by alcohol. I could see it happening, piece by piece, but I never thought it would get as bad as it did. The year started off rough. I had to step in and help Alan complete an escort mission after he'd passed out drunk, nearly missing the entire time frame. It should have been a red flag, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just a fluke. Unfortunately, it wasn't. His downward spiral continued, and his failures became harder to ignore. In one of his last offerings, he managed to let one of them, an offering, escape from his own truck. I got a frantic call from him, the panic in his voice clear as day. He was losing control. I drove out to search for the escapee. The thought that the girl couldn't have gone far comforted me. But when I found the truck abandoned just under 2 miles from the barn, I knew things had gone bad. I kept driving down the dirt road, hoping I'd find her before someone else did. And then, there she was. The girl, running down the road like she was being chased by something worse than death itself. Her face twisted in sheer terror. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes locking onto my uniform with a visible wave of relief. She explained how she had barely gotten away, but she couldn't drive the truck. She begged for help. But I knew better than to take her back, to risk everything just to keep her alive a few more minutes. I walked up to her, offering her that fleeting moment of false comfort, and then I ended it. One shot from my .357 Magnum, quick and clean. Later that week, the call came. It was time to let Alan go. I walked into his house to find him barely able to sit up, the stench of whiskey thick in the air. He was a wreck, both physically and mentally. I had to end it. I dragged him out back, put the barrel of my gun against his skull, and squeezed the trigger. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. He was a liability, and after what had happened, I couldn't let him drag us down any further. It's been 2 weeks since I let him go, and now I've been promoted to sheriff. They've tasked me with finding a new deputy. But here's the thing. If you ever see an ad looking for a small-town sheriff's deputy, take my advice and look elsewhere. Trust me, you don't want to end up in Clydesville. Never, ever mess with satanic rituals. The story I'm about to share with you is completely true. Every person, every event is real. I'll change the names for privacy reasons, but other than that, I can assure you this is all based on my own experiences. In the end, this isn't just a story, it's a warning. I want the world to know what happens when you dabble with forces far beyond our understanding. Let me start by introducing my friend Mike. We've known each other since we were kids. He's been my closest friend through everything, sticking by my side through the worst of times. Growing up, we didn't have many friends, which made us inseparable. We were the kind of friends who didn't need anyone else. But as we hit high school, things started to change. Mike hit puberty. And when he did, he turned into this handsome guy, the one that every girl suddenly wanted. It was like flipping a switch. 1 minute, I was his best friend, and the next, I was the guy who kind of faded into the background. But Mike never treated me like I was invisible. He kept our weekly tradition of pizza and horror movie nights, no matter how popular he became. Wednesday nights were still our time, and that meant more to me than anything. Now, the part of the story that you need to understand happened one night when we were watching a movie called The Possession. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, just another creepy horror film about demons and the supernatural. But it was the last line of the movie that set everything in motion. As the credits rolled and the screen went dark, a line was spoken in a strange language. I turned to Mike, and that's when I saw it. His eyes were wide, blank, almost like he wasn't there anymore. He looked straight at me and said, "It's never over." At first, I thought he was joking. Maybe he was quoting something from the movie, but the way he said it, the coldness in his voice, it didn't feel like a joke. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. But Mike didn't smile. He didn't even blink. He just stared at me with that eerie, vacant look in his eyes and said, "It's Enochian." I had no idea what that meant. I thought he was just messing with me, so I joked, "Is that Latin or something?" But Mike just shook his head slowly, still locked in that unnerving gaze. "No, it's Enochian," he repeated. I had never heard of Enochian before, so when Mike left that night, I jumped online to look it up. What I found stunned me. Enochian wasn't just some obscure language. It was originally created in the 16th century by occultists to communicate with angels. But over time, it became associated with something far darker, fallen angels, demons, and ultimately satanic rituals. It was a language used to summon and communicate with entities from another realm. But here's the thing. Mike couldn't even speak Spanish. How in the world did he know about Enochian? How could he have translated a language like that? I figured it was just some weird coincidence. Maybe he'd picked it up from watching too many horror films. But deep down, I had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I tried to push it all out of my head. I told myself it was just a movie, just a silly moment between friends. But now I know. I should have paid attention. The next day at school, I decided to confront Mike about the strange language he had mentioned the night before. I figured maybe there was a logical explanation, so I casually asked him about it. Mike just shrugged it off, laughing as if it was no big deal. "Oh, it's just something me and Dan learned," he said with a grin. "We used it to pass notes in class without anyone knowing what we were saying." At the time, it seemed harmless enough, even kind of clever. I didn't think much of it and just let it go. Big mistake. The following day was when everything changed. Fahim. I was sitting in my room, scrolling through my phone, when I suddenly heard someone yelling my name outside. I rushed to the window and looked out, and to my shock, I saw one of Mike's friends, Dan, sprinting straight for my house. I rushed outside to meet him, and as he came closer, I could see he was out of breath, his face pale and drenched in sweat. He barely stopped to catch his breath before looking up at me, his eyes wide with terror. The look in his eyes froze me in place. I asked him what happened, but all he could manage to say, in a near whisper, was one word: Mike. I quickly brought Dan inside and gave him a glass of water, trying to calm him down. He was shaking so badly that I was starting to get worried. When he finally settled, I pressed him for more details, asking if Mike was in trouble. Dan hesitated for a moment, then said, "Mike's fine, but something happened to him. Something's wrong." The next words out of Dan's mouth made the blood in my veins run cold. Mike and I were walking in the woods when he started talking about some weird language he learned. He said it was for doing magic spells or something. Enochian, I think he called it. Anyway, he said he could kill a frog with it. So he picked one up and started chanting in that creepy language. The frog, it started to wither, like it had been left out in the sun for too long, and then it just died, right there in his hands. I tried to tell him to stop, but when I put my hand on his shoulder, he turned around and, you're not going to believe this, but his eyes were completely white. Like all of it. His whole eye, not a single bit of black left. Dan's voice broke as he continued, his words trembling. After that, Mike screamed and started chasing me through the woods. I don't know what happened, but I barely escaped. I was running so fast, and I thought I saw him right behind me. Did you see him? He was coming for me. Where did he go? I just sat there, frozen in shock. Mike had lied to me. He hadn't been using Enochian for passing notes like he had said. No, it was something darker. Something far worse. But what really struck me, and sent chills crawling up my spine, was when I looked out my window. Dan had been running from the woods, but when I looked down the long street after him, I realized something terrifying. There was no one behind him. No one was chasing him. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that maybe I had missed Mike somehow. But deep down, I knew there was something far more sinister happening. "We have to go find him," I said to Dan, my voice shaking. Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my keys, and we headed out in my car. We drove around the neighborhood, keeping close to the edge of the forest, hoping Mike would come running out, laughing, and telling us it was all just a joke. But we never found him that day. After dropping Dan off, I headed back home. I took the road that passed near the forest again, hoping that maybe I'd see something, anything, that would explain what had happened. As I drove, I had the strangest feeling, like something was watching me. I slowed down, scanning the trees on the side of the road. And that's when I saw him. Mike was standing about 100 feet from my car, but not in a normal way. His back was bent at an unnatural angle, almost like he was crouching but standing upright at the same time. His neck was twisted at a grotesque angle, craning toward me. I could see his eyes, white as snow, but full of venom and pure hate. He was deathly pale, his skin almost sickly, and his clothes were torn, hanging from his body like rags. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, speeding away as fast as I could. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, convinced I could still see him running after my car, his twisted form chasing me in the darkness. But every time I checked, there was nothing. No Mike, no shadow, just empty road behind me. That night, I tried to sleep, but but every time I closed my eyes, the image of Mike's white, hate-filled eyes haunted me. Then, in the dead of night, I woke up to a sound from my window. It was faint at first, just a light tap, like someone gently knocking. I turned toward the sound, and my heart almost stopped. Mike was there. His face was pressed against the glass, his eyes wide and full of rage. His skin was so pale, it looked like he had been dead for days. I could see his mouth move, but no sound came from his lips. I quickly turned to switch on my lamp, hoping that when I looked back, he would be gone. But when I glanced back toward the window, he was gone. Just like that. Vanished. I turned on every light in my room, not caring that I couldn't sleep. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, terrified of what was happening to my friend. I knew one thing for sure. Mike was no longer the same. And whatever had taken hold of him, whatever dark force had gotten into him, it wasn't over. The scariest part? My room was on the second floor. The next day, I tried to go to school as if everything was normal. I knew it was probably the last place I should be, but I didn't have much choice. Life seemed to demand routine, even when it felt like everything was slipping out of control. I was still haunted by the image of Mike's twisted figure in the woods, and the terror that gripped me the night he appeared at my window. But I had to keep going. When I walked into the schoolyard, I was immediately taken aback. There, sitting with a group of girls by the bleachers, was Mike. It was like nothing had happened. His appearance was as carefree as ever. No ragged clothes, no pale skin, no haunting white eyes. He looked completely normal, even though I knew in the pit of my stomach that something was off. He saw me almost immediately and flashed me a huge, unnervingly wide grin. One that was too bright, too exaggerated, like something out of a cartoon. Then, as if we were old friends, he winked at me. The smile he gave me was all wrong. It wasn't the friendly, familiar grin I remembered from before, but something sinister. A kind of smugness, like he knew something I didn't. And that's when it hit me. The sickness in my stomach, the dread curling around my insides. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I turned on my heels and rushed back to my car without saying a word. I didn't care if people stared. I didn't care if they thought I was crazy. I needed to get away, to get home, where I could lock myself inside and try to make sense of all of this. And now, here I am, sitting in my room, trying to write this down, trying to put the pieces together. I thought I could find some comfort in the silence, maybe even convince myself that I was just overreacting, that this was all some terrible nightmare I'd soon wake up from. But I don't think I'm alone anymore. It started with a small noise, something soft like a tap. At first, I thought it was just the house settling or maybe the wind knocking something over. But as I listened, the tapping came again, sharper this time. It's coming from my closet. The noise is faint, but it's unmistakable. Tap, tap, tap. I froze, my blood running cold. I knew exactly what it was. I didn't need to hear it again. I didn't need to see it with my own eyes. I already knew who it was, Mike, or whatever had taken his place. It's like he's here, in the house with me, just out of sight. I've checked every door and window and everything is locked. My room is locked. Yet the tapping persists, growing louder with every passing second. I can feel it, like a weight pressing down on my chest. The air is too thick, too heavy. My thoughts are racing, but they don't make sense. My mind is telling me to run, to leave, to get out of this house and never look back. But my body won't move. And then I remember what Dan said. Mike, his eyes were white, like they'd rolled back into his head. I never thought I'd be the one to tell someone to avoid the horrors I've faced. I never thought I'd be the one sharing this kind of warning. But now, here I am, writing this for anyone who might listen. If you're reading this, heed my words. Stay away from anything that even remotely hints at the occult. Never mess with satanic rituals. Never try to summon forces you don't understand. Because once you've crossed that line, there's no turning back. And as for Mike, I don't know if he's still Mike. I don't know what's left of him anymore. But I do know one thing for certain. I will never end. When I was 17, I found myself driving through the dilapidated streets of our state's capital on a warm summer night. It was a part of town most people avoided, an open-air market of misery, where heroin, cannabis, crack, meth, and all sorts of illicit substances were exchanged freely. Prostitutes walked the streets like they were just another part of the scenery, and dealers stood on corners, hustling their poison with a sense of quiet confidence. The police were aware of the situation, of course. They'd make the occasional bust to give the illusion of order, but the problems never seemed to improve. If anything, the issues only escalated. For every dealer arrested, 2 more were waiting in the wings to take their place. The young men in the area had little to look forward to. Few jobs, even fewer prospects, and no hope for a future that didn't involve drugs or violence. They joined gangs, sold whatever they could to survive, and shot each other over petty slights. Hope was a commodity long gone from these streets. As for me, I was just a curious teenager. I had heard about LSD, and like any curious mind, I wanted to try it. I didn't have a clue where to get it, though, and desperation led me to take this insane gamble. Hard drugs like fentanyl and cocaine were easy to find in places like this, but psychedelics? Those were a rare breed, sold by those few who still believed in expanding consciousness. Most people in these neighborhoods had traded that pursuit for something more numbing, something to keep them high and hopeless. Still, I wandered these streets, hoping to find someone who could help me. And then I saw him. At the corner, standing in the dim light, was a man who looked like he might know a thing or two about psychedelics. He wore a blood-red shirt, the kind you could only find in places like this, with a black upside-down pentagram emblazoned on both sides. His face was covered in piercings and metal implants, and his head was completely bald. I couldn't help but think back to the DARE officer's warning. It always starts with hallucinogens. Then they get into witchcraft and Satanism, and before you know it, they're jumping out of windows, convinced they can fly like Icarus. It was a memory that lingered in my mind as I approached him. "Hey there," I said with a casual smile, trying to act like I belonged. "Hello, friend?" he replied in a slow, hissing voice that sent a chill down my spine. His tongue was split down the middle, both sides adorned with silver piercings. "My name is Nibarius." "Davy," I said, keeping my tone friendly. "I was wondering if you knew where I could get some LSD? Or maybe mescaline?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Sadly, no. It's a dry spell around here. Everyone's more into smack these days. No demand for consciousness expansion anymore. But I do have something much better. Human pineal glands." I raised an eyebrow. "Human pineal glands?" He nodded, his pupils wide and dilated, staring at me with an intensity that almost felt like a physical weight. "It's the greatest high you can imagine. Totally non-addictive. You just chew it up like gum. Doesn't taste great, but it will take you farther than acid ever could. Some people even shoot up the extract for an even more intense experience." I wasn't exactly naive, but I couldn't help but feel uneasy. "What exactly is this pineal gland stuff? I've never heard of it before." He handed me a small plastic bag with what appeared to be a tiny, bloodied worm-like creature curled up at the bottom. I recoiled. "This?" I asked, staring at the bizarre object inside the bag. "It doesn't look like much, but trust me, kid, that shit will have you tripping balls in no time," he said, his voice low and convincing. I hesitated, still skeptical, but something in the pit of my stomach told me that this wasn't going to be a simple high. Still, I didn't know how to say no. "Not yet." "You know what, kid?" Nibarius said with a grin that stretched far too wide, showing off rows of sharpened teeth. "We're having a party tonight, just a few miles down the road, 217 Blaine Road. We're letting people try pineal glands for free, just doing a little favor for the community." His voice slithered with each word. "We'd love to have you join us. We might even have some free adrenochrome for you." I hesitated for a moment, but the invitation was too tempting to refuse. "Okay," I blurted out, plastering a nervous smile on my face. The idea of being in a party full of Satanists didn't sit well with me, but it was rude to turn down such a generous offer. Little did I know, I had just agreed to step into one of the most depraved cults in existence. If I had known then, I would have been better off just finding some acid. The town of Harlequin Springs, a few miles outside the city, was a desolate place that looked like it belonged in some post-apocalyptic nightmare. The buildings were run down, the roads cracked and uneven. Even the sidewalks, where they existed, were barely passable. People moved through the streets with flat, dead eyes, their faces devoid of hope, hunched under the weight of life's crushing monotony. They reeked of cheap soup, stale cigarettes, and despair. It was as if the soul of the town had been sucked dry, leaving only hollow, exhausted shells of humanity. I parked my car on the side of the street and walked past these sad, broken people who didn't acknowledge me or anyone else. Eyes fixed on the ground, they trudged along, probably on their way to or from some dead-end job. Their lives nothing but an endless cycle of work, drink, and drugs. A few bars on the block were open, their lights flickering as weirdos wandered in and out, smelling of cheap gin and stale sweat. After a few minutes of walking, I finally found the house. It wasn't marked with a clear number, but the music coming from one of the nearby buildings told me I was in the right place. The house was a large, old Victorian, its dark red paint faded and chipped. The music wasn't anything I had ever heard before. It sounded like a symphony gone wrong, notes stretched out in strange discord, accompanied by low, distorted screams. It was the kind of music you'd expect at a gathering orchestrated by Satan himself. I knocked at the door, and it opened almost instantly. Inside, the walls were bathed in the eerie glow of black lights. I barely had time to process the scene before the host, a man with pointed teeth and glowing eyes, greeted me with a sinister smile. He didn't look human. Or maybe he did, but just barely. The room behind him was full of people. They were sitting, drinking, smoking, and laughing like it was a regular party. People danced in a trance, moving to the strange music. But the air was thick with something far darker than any party atmosphere I had ever felt. I still had the human pineal gland in my pocket, sealed tightly in an airtight plastic bag. I hadn't decided when to try it, though. I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, but I figured I'd wait until I felt comfortable enough to take the plunge. After all, I had heard rumors that chewing on one was like a combination of meth, pure adrenaline, and DMT. The thought made my stomach churn. As I walked further into the house, I passed a hallway and caught sight of a tall man standing in the kitchen. He was sticking a needle into his jugular, looking into a mirror to make sure he didn't miss the spot. He took a deep breath, expanding his chest to bulge the veins in his neck, making it easier to find the vein. I smiled awkwardly at him, unsure how to respond. "Don't worry," he said, his voice calm, almost comforting. "It's just adrenochrome." Adrenochrome. The drug I had only heard about in whispers, a purified chemical extracted from human pineal glands. It could only be harvested from a fresh body, either from a murder victim or someone who had just died. After being taken, it created a powerful high, one that seemed to last forever for those who could afford it. But I knew better than to get too close to that kind of thing. The man pulled the needle out, capped it, and slipped it into his pocket. His eyes were dilating uncontrollably, his pupils rapidly expanding and contracting like he was experiencing some kind of rapid withdrawal. He began to sweat, his breathing quickening. There was something wild in his eyes, something barely contained, and it looked like he was on the verge of losing control of his body. "I was only 5 feet tall when I started taking adrenochrome every day," he said, his voice rumbling with a strange, unsettling satisfaction. I backed away slightly, unsure of what I was witnessing. The room around me seemed to spin a little faster, the music growing louder, and the people, those people, seemed to move in ways that no longer looked natural. "Wow," I said, genuinely amazed. "This stuff must be great for your body if you've grown that much." "Oh, it is," Zebedun said, flashing a dreadful smile. Blood dripped from one nostril, staining his already monstrous face. His veins bulged like thick cables beneath his skin, popping to the rhythm of his pounding heart. He extended a massive hand, and when I shook it, my own palm felt tiny in comparison. "I'm Davy," I said, trying to sound confident despite my growing unease. "They call me Zebedun," he growled, stretching out the name as if savoring it. "I'm a follower of Moloch." "Cool," I replied, though I had no idea what that meant. "Like on Twitter?" He laughed, a deep, guttural sound, and slapped me so hard on the back that I almost toppled over. Looking down, I saw he was heavily armed. A massive pistol rested in his waistband, one that looked like it could fire shotgun slugs, and he wore a flak jacket. Tattoos covered his arms, and I recognized some of them: the Black Sun and Baphomet. The writing scrawled across his skin was unrecognizable, not in any language I had ever seen. My anxiety spiked. Why did he need all this firepower? "You're a riot, Davy," he said, wiping a tear from his eye. "Just for that, I'll give you a free shot. How would you like some adrenochrome?" I froze. I had never tried adrenochrome before. The thought of starting with a pineal gland, just chewing on it, seemed safer. But I knew it would be rude to refuse him. My heart pounded as I nodded, even though part of me screamed not to. I had heard rumors. Terrible rumors about what happened to people who did too much adrenochrome. "Awesome," Zebedun said, pulling a clean needle from his back pocket. It was already filled with some thick, silvery liquid. Tiny floating particles shimmered inside it, reflecting light in iridescent colors. It looked pure. Too pure. "Thanks, mister," I said, stepping toward the bathroom, but Zebedun's massive arm blocked me. "Nah, I think you should do it here," he said with a low chuckle. So I reluctantly sat down at the kitchen table, my mind racing as I poked and prodded at my skin. It took a moment, but finally a flash of blood entered the needle, and I pushed down on the plunger. The adrenochrome shot into my veins. The moment it hit my bloodstream, I tasted it. Mints and burning chemicals. My body recoiled, and the pain in my brain was immediate. It felt like my mind was on fire. But almost as quickly as the agony started, it was gone, replaced by an electric surge of energy. I jumped up from the table, my heart racing. The world around me began to warp. The face of Zebedun seemed to melt, his eyes oozing from their sockets, sliding down his cheeks like goo. Before I could even process what was happening, the basement door crashed open with a frenzy, slamming against the far wall. I startled, the adrenaline making me twitch like a cat on caffeine, and smashed my head against the wall in surprise. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine, sharp and piercing. For a moment, my vision went white, and the pain felt like nails driven into my skull. But then my vision cleared, and I saw her. A young girl, no older than 15, her face a mess of dirt and tears. A broken chain trailed behind her, scraping across the floor. Her eyes locked with mine, then shot to Zebedun. Without hesitation, she bolted, zigging and zagging past the massive hands of the Satanist, who was too slow to catch her. "Get her, Davy," Zebedun shouted. The girl was almost through the door, and I could feel the tension crackle in the air as she ran for her life. I felt like a Nazi, but then again, I was a guest in their home. I hesitated for a moment, but then desperation kicked in. I lunged, and just as she was about to break free, I grabbed the broken metal chain dragging behind her ankle. She stumbled, crashing to the ground with a heavy thud. She shook her head furiously and leapt back up, her eyes wild with fear and fury. Without warning, she drove her fist into my eye. "Ah, God damn it!" I yelped, clutching my rapidly swelling eye. The floor shook with the pounding steps of the 7-foot freak with tattoos around his eyes, his massive body charging into the room. He was sweating profusely, his eyes darting left and right as he panted heavily. He grabbed the girl by the shoulder and spun her around with inhuman strength. With a snarl, he pulled a switchblade from his pocket and without hesitation plunged it into her skull. The blade sank with a sickening crack, twisting violently as he carved open her head. The sound was horrific, like breaking a walnut with a hammer. Her legs buckled as he split her open, her mouth gaping in a silent scream. "This is getting out of hand," I muttered, my head spinning. The adrenochrome was still pulsing through my system, turning the entire scene into a grotesque nightmare. I stumbled toward the back door, desperate to escape the chaos. What the hell had I gotten myself into? Why had I come here? The adrenochrome still had me by the throat, my body slick with sweat. The walls of the house seemed to dissolve, revealing a grotesque, bone-structured framework beneath. The air was thick with distortion, each breath feeling like I was inhaling fire. I saw people, or what seemed like people, mutating before my eyes. A goth woman with her skin burned off, only blackened, smoking muscles left grinned at me, but all I could see were her rotting gums and cracked teeth falling out in chunks. "Focus, Davy. Ignore it. It's just the drug. Just hallucinations," I told myself, gritting my teeth. But then again, I was surrounded by Satanists. How could I know what was real and what wasn't? The backyard, I thought, would be quieter. At least there, I could breathe. I stumbled outside, the cold night air biting at my sweat-soaked skin. A small group of men and women in black robes were gathered in a semicircle around an old tractor trailer, parked in the yard. The cab was empty, but the trailer itself was covered in dark symbols, esoteric, satanic graffiti that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The chant filled the air, a guttural hissing sound unlike any language I had ever heard. It was similar to Semitic tongues, but with an otherworldly rasp and growl, as if the words themselves were made of dark, ancient things. In the front of the crowd, I saw Niberius, his face a small comfort amidst the madness. The cool breeze helped to calm my racing pulse, and the hallucinations began to recede, though my body still felt tight, my clothes too small. It was hard to tell if it was the drug or something else, but it definitely felt like I was growing. Niberius and the others finished their chant and approached the trailer. They threw open the back door, and something massive began to emerge. First, it was a hand. No, too many hands. Too many fingers. It grabbed the door with claws the size of kitchen knives. Then another hand grabbed the other side, and another grabbed the ceiling, and another reached for the floor. How many hands does it have? I thought, panic shooting through me. The thing kept pulling itself forward, dragging itself with horrible squelching sounds. Then a head, ancient, impossibly large, with eyes that glowed like the pits of hell, slithered out of the trailer. The thing looked around, its movements slow and deliberate, as though savoring the fear in the air. I froze. A primal instinct told me to run, but then another thought struck me. What happens to the ones who run? The predators always go after the stragglers, the weak, the one who tries to escape. I swallowed hard, my body trembling as the creature fully emerged from the trailer, its multiple limbs scuttling across the ground like some twisted spider. The air grew thick with the scent of blood and decay, and I couldn't tell if the terror flooding my veins was from the adrenochrome or the reality of the horror unfolding before me. Its eyes flickered with an inner fire, a hellish blend of red and orange that seemed to glow from deep within. The creature's nose was reduced to 2 slits, and its ears mere indentations on its misshapen head. Its mouth, it was like a snake's, disengaged, its jaw hanging unnaturally low, revealing a mouthful of perfectly sharp teeth, rows upon rows of them, gleaming like polished ivory in the dark. But it was its skin that truly horrified me. Pale, nearly white with sickly blue patches of cyanosis, it was covered in massive sores and festering wounds that leaked pus and maggots onto the grass and floor of the truck. As it moved, its bulk shaking the ground beneath it, I realized the true nightmare. Nearly every inch of its flesh was crawling with maggots and insects, writhing and burrowing into the rotten tissue. I gagged, my stomach threatening to expel the contents of my last meal. "Lord Jesus in heaven," I shouted, my voice hoarse with disgust and terror. "What is that thing?" Apparently that was the wrong thing to say. I felt the eyes of dozens of Satanists turn on me, their faces twisted in scorn and anger. I saw one man unstrap his pistol, his fingers twitching around the handle. But the creature saved me, in its own brutal way. With a speed I hadn't anticipated, it shot out one of its 4 skeletal ivory arms and snatched the nearest Satanist into the air. The man screamed, his black robes fluttering in the night sky. The creature's jaws snapped shut, its hundreds of teeth slicing through the man's neck in a horrific crunch. The snap echoed through the yard, silencing the distant music from the house. The others began to scatter in a panic, but it was too late. The creature's other arms lashed out, capturing 3 more people before they could even react. Niberius was one of them. With a grotesque spray of blood, the creature started devouring them alive, shoving their screaming bodies into its cavernous mouth, ripping them apart with violent glee. Its silver saliva mixed with the bright red arterial spray of the dying, coating the grass in a sickening mixture of life and death. Without thinking, I bolted for the house, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I was spiraling, the weight of the adrenochrome pulsing through me like electricity, pushing me toward a full-blown panic attack. The house. I thought it might be safer, but I wasn't sure of anything anymore. When I stumbled back inside, though, it was empty. Every last person seemed to have disappeared. I looked around in confusion, my mind racing. Some might have gone out back, but surely not all of them. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, the front door burst open with a terrifying crack, and 2 cops stormed in. The first grabbed me with one hand, his grip like iron, pulling me roughly toward him. His gun was pointed at my forehead, cold and steady. His eyes, brown, lifeless, scanned me as if I were livestock, his expression calculating and detached. My pulse was racing, my body on the verge of collapsing. I felt dizzy, sweat running down my back, my clothes starting to feel too tight. The adrenochrome was taking over. My muscles were growing, my skin burning, and the terror mounting with every passing second. "What the hell is this?" I managed to croak. "Put your hands up, you sick freak," the cop snarled. I raised my hands instinctively, my mind in a fog. "You kidnapping, murdering Satanists, I should kill you right now, just on principle." "No, you don't understand," I cried, my voice deepening, panic creeping in. "I'm just a guest here. I'm a high school student named..." But my name never escaped my lips. At that moment, the creature's enormous arms shot through the front door, splintering the wood and disintegrating the threshold in a violent explosion of debris. Both cops were yanked off their feet before they could even react, screaming as they fired wildly at the monstrous limbs. One bullet grazed my ear, whizzing past my head so close I could feel the wind from it, narrowly missing me. "Fuck this," I screamed, heart pounding. "I'm getting out of here." I bolted for the back of the house, adrenaline fueling every step. The yard was a macabre scene. The Satanists who had been chanting just moments ago were now twisted heaps of gore, ripped apart, devoured, or decapitated. It was carnage, every inch of the grass soaked in blood. The air reeked of death and decay. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The ground shook beneath me as the creature came barreling around the side of the house, its massive form moving with terrifying speed. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the human pineal gland. Without thinking, I hurled it toward the creature. It stopped dead in its tracks, its long neck bending down, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air like a predator on the hunt. Its eyes, glowing with an unnatural hunger, locked onto the small object. It was enough to distract it, just long enough for me to get away. I didn't dare look back. I ran blindly into the woods, the underbrush snagging at my clothes, sharp thorns and branches tearing at my skin, but I didn't care. I had to get away. I had to escape. The terror was all-consuming, driving me forward like a man possessed. Eventually, I stumbled back onto the main street, breathless and covered in blood, my body aching from the chaotic sprint. The creature was gone. The town was quiet, eerily so. There were no signs of life, no movement, no sound. It was as if the entire town had vanished in the wake of the nightmare. I walked down the street, my feet heavy, my mind unraveling from the sheer horror of what I'd witnessed. I felt different. Taller, yes, but something more, something darker. The fear, the loathing, the panic, it had consumed me. I knew I would never be the same again. I had left behind more than just a town. I had left a part of myself in that hellhole. This took place in the summer of 2017. My girlfriend and I are both from St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. After graduating from university, we decided to take a road trip through the United States to celebrate. Our final destination was Miami, Florida, where her family has a condo near the beach, giving us a place to stay for free. Instead of flying, we chose to drive so we could explore the country along the way and visit a few friends. The trip typically takes 20 to 24 hours of nonstop driving, but we planned on making several stops to stretch our legs and enjoy the journey. The first leg of the trip was fantastic. We went shopping in Buffalo, then made our way to Pittsburgh where we caught a Pirates game. But once we crossed into West Virginia, everything changed. It was just endless wilderness, with only a few small towns scattered in between. Our goal was to get to Charlotte, North Carolina, to meet some friends for dinner. So we wanted to push through West Virginia as quickly as possible, stopping only when necessary. We ended up pulling over at a gas station in a very remote area. My girlfriend went inside to grab some snacks and use the washroom while I began pumping gas. As I was halfway through filling the tank, I heard a voice from behind me asking, "Y'all lost?" I turned around to see a middle-aged white man with long, tangled brown hair that reached his shoulders, and a scruffy beard streaked with gray, and what looked like dried mucus. His clothes were ragged, covered in dirt, and he reeked of beer, sweat, urine, and feces. He was a bit overweight but fairly tall, about 6'4", so a few inches taller than me. His remaining teeth were yellow and decayed. On his right cheek, just below his eye, was a tattoo of a pentagram. Since I followed true crime and cult videos on YouTube, I immediately recognized it. He had moved so close to me that I could smell his rancid breath. It made me dizzy, so I instinctively stepped back. "No, sir, just passing through," I said, trying to sound calm but nervous. "Not too often we see tourists around here," he replied, stepping even closer. "Where ya headed?" He closed the distance until I was backed up against my car, unable to move further. I wanted to get away from him, but my car was still fueling, and my girlfriend was still inside the gas station. I didn't want him to know where we were really going, so I told him we were visiting family in Kentucky. He cracked a strange half-smile, just wide enough for me to catch a glimpse of his rotting teeth. That face, I'll never forget it. His bloodshot eyes seemed to pierce through me. Then he let out a low, sinister laugh. "How lovely," he said. "I'll see you kids around." And with that, he walked away. I was relieved he left, but that last line stuck with me. How did he know we were a couple? I hadn't even seen him when we pulled up, so he must have been watching us. The gas tank finally clicked off, and I saw my girlfriend walking back to the car, snacks in hand. But that strange guy hadn't left. He was now a few pumps away, leaning against an old red pickup truck, not alone. 2 other men and a woman were with him, making the group 4 in total. The men were just as big as him, both with shaved heads. One wore a dirty white tank top, the other had no shirt at all. The woman was shorter, about 5'5", and very thin, with heavy bags under her eyes and long, messy blonde hair. They all looked like they had been living off the grid for years. They were staring at us, pointing, and talking to each other. As soon as my girlfriend reached the car, I told her urgently to get in. I'm usually calm, but when she noticed I was on edge, she understood something was wrong. We quickly got in, locked the doors, and I floored it, peeling out of the gas station. As we pulled around the red truck to exit, I saw a pentagram painted on the hood and a goat or ram skull on the windshield. I knew they were going to follow us. I told my girlfriend what had happened as we sped down the road. I checked my rearview mirror, and sure enough, the red truck was right behind us. I sped up, they followed. I turned left, they followed. I made a full U-turn, and they did the same. My girlfriend managed to get a signal and called 911. We gave them our location, and they directed us to the nearest police station. The operator asked for the license plate, but there wasn't one on the truck. After hanging up, my girlfriend stuck her phone out of the window, pointing it at them, showing that we had called the cops. That seemed to do the trick. They stopped tailing us. We made it to the police station and filed a report, giving them a description of the truck and the people. The investigator said they'd contact us if they had any updates. We were shaken to the core, but also felt a sense of relief. All we wanted was to get the hell out of West Virginia. We thought we had shaken the group off for good, but unfortunately, we were wrong. Deciding to drive through the night, we hoped to cover as much ground as possible. The area we were passing through was in the heart of Appalachia, with no streetlights. All I could see was what my headlights illuminated. Everything seemed fine at first until I noticed 2 headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I kept watching them. The headlights grew closer, and soon they were tailgating us. To my utter shock and terror, it was the same red truck from the gas station. Somehow, they had tracked us down and were right behind us. "It's them!" I shouted in horror. My girlfriend immediately began to panic and dialed 911. I slammed the gas pedal, not even knowing what was ahead of me. All I cared about was getting away. We made it about a mile before my girlfriend screamed, "Watch out!" Ahead of us were 3 dead cows blocking the narrow road. I slammed on the brakes. The red truck was so close behind us, we couldn't go forward. We had walked right into a trap. Suddenly, a naked man wearing a goat mask emerged from the woods, charging toward our car, and began smashing it with what looked like a large axe. He climbed onto the hood of the car and started making disturbing sheep-like noises. My girlfriend was still on the phone with 911, but all she could do was scream. The people in the red truck got out and began walking toward us. 2 of them were carrying rifles, and the other had a machete. I knew what I had to do. I slammed the car into reverse and floored it. The naked man fell off the hood, and we slammed into the red truck, knocking it into a ditch. Once the truck was out of the way, I pulled the quickest U-turn of my life, and we sped off. They were shouting all kinds of obscenities as we fled. I drove as fast as I could until we reached a town where we immediately filed another police report. Thankfully, neither my girlfriend nor I were physically harmed, but we were severely traumatized. The car was still drivable, so we managed to get the hell out of West Virginia the next morning. This whole experience left my girlfriend and me terrified of road trips. I still occasionally call the local police in West Virginia, hoping they have leads on these people, but so far, they've found nothing. The fact that these people were able to find us after we went to the police station and drove so far still terrifies and baffles me. Who knows what kind of sick and twisted plans this cult had if they had managed to catch us. Stay safe out there, everyone, and never let your guard down. 3 months ago, Diana disappeared. My 17-year-old sister-in-law vanished without a single trace. Diana was 10 years younger than me and 8 years younger than Emma, my wife. Though she was adopted, Diana and Emma shared an unshakable bond. They were closer to each other than either of them was to their biological families, and I was drawn into that connection as well. Diana was family to me too. In some ways, I felt like I was trying to guide her as she navigated through the mess that was her teenage years, especially considering her past. She had a lot of trauma from growing up in foster care, scars that were deeper than she let on. Diana's interests were, at times, a little concerning. One of the things that stood out was her fascination with Satanism. It started off as something rebellious, a reflection of the anti-establishment phase most teens go through. She was never fully immersed in the darker aspects of it, but was intrigued by the idea of rejecting tradition and authority. At first, I wasn't sure how to respond, but being someone who had explored a bit of the so-called dark side myself, I thought it might be a good idea to introduce her to more structured branches of it, like the misanthropic Luciferian order and the Setian temple. I wanted to show her just how silly it all was, how much of it was for show, and how little of it had any substance. But Diana, as I expected, quickly grew disillusioned with the whole thing. She called it utterly idiotic, and I was relieved that she'd abandoned it. Smart kid. But when Diana went missing, I couldn't stop blaming myself. What if she'd latched onto something darker from all that exposure? What if something from those teachings had pushed her to make the choice to disappear? My mind kept circling the possibility of her ending her own life. Her depression, something she had struggled with for years, had become overwhelming in the days before she vanished. I kept thinking that perhaps the emotional weight had become too much for her to handle, and I feared I might have unknowingly contributed to it. Emma was taking it much harder than I was, naturally. Her whole world had come to a halt. Each day that passed, our stress levels climbed. At night, we would lie in bed together, silently staring at the ceiling. Neither of us had the energy to sleep, but we couldn't bring ourselves to do anything else either. Days turned into weeks, and life seemed to slow down, losing its vibrancy. The grief was suffocating. The one silver lining, though, was that Emma and I didn't let the stress tear us apart. We still clung to each other. I'd hoped that this nightmare wouldn't destroy us. But one thing that bothered me was my mother-in-law's behavior. She had always called us a few times a week, just to chat, even after everything that had happened with Emma growing up. It had been her way of making up for being a distant mother, trying to bridge the gap with Emma. But since Diana's disappearance, there had been complete radio silence from her. No calls, no messages. It struck me as odd, but at the time I didn't know how to address it. It was especially strange to me that my mother-in-law had completely shut us out after Diana's disappearance, especially considering Diana had last been seen at our place. You would think that the least she could do was check in on Emma, especially with everything that was going on, but no, she just refused. It was as if the disappearance of her granddaughter hadn't even registered with her. Emma, desperate for some sort of connection, had gone to visit her mother in person, hoping for some support, some comfort. But instead, she was met with a cold door. Her mother refused to let her in. The confrontation that followed was intense. A storm of words and emotions. It ended in a shouting match, and I was absolutely furious when I found out. Yet, at the same time, the anger quickly morphed into something else. Something even heavier. It was overwhelming sadness, a kind of grief for what could have been, for what should have been. That night, I remember drifting into what I thought was a dream, but in the strange way that nightmares do, it felt too real. I was standing at the end of a dark, endless corridor. And there, at the far end, was Diana, or what used to be Diana. Her once bright face was now a grotesque, bloated mask of decay, her skin pale and wrinkled. I could see the bloated gashes across her arms and neck, maggots writhing within the festering wounds. The smell of decay was suffocating. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, only stare in horror as her vacant blue eyes seemed to plead for something I couldn't understand. It was like a nightmare that haunted me, chasing me every time I closed my eyes. The nightmares, or rather the recurring hallucinations, started to spill into my waking life as well. I began experiencing sleep paralysis, something I had never struggled with before. But the most terrifying part wasn't the demon that people usually report seeing in these episodes. It wasn't anything like that. No, it was Diana, or what was left of her. I kept seeing her form, decaying and lifeless, standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes still pleading, her mouth gaping open, spilling out worms and dirt. I could hear the soft slither of maggots crawling in and out of the wounds, her skin hanging loose from her bones. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. It took every ounce of willpower to look away, but every time I could feel her presence in the room with me. I haven't told Emma any of this. She already has her own demons to fight. She knows I've been struggling with night terrors, but I couldn't bring myself to burden her with my hallucinations too. She's told me that she's been having nightmares as well, though. Part of me wonders if she's seeing the same horrible things I am. The thought of her going through this too terrifies me, but I've been trying to hide it from her as much as possible. Then, last week, it all came to a head. I came home from work, exhausted and drained, just wanting to collapse onto the couch and forget about the world. But as soon as I stepped through the door, Emma was already there, her emotions spilling over. She was upset, pacing back and forth, and then, without warning, her voice grew louder, sharper. She started yelling at me, her frustration boiling over. She told me she couldn't take it anymore. She was sick and tired of everything, the stress, the grief, the constant weight that had been crushing us both for months. At first I was frozen. I didn't know what to say or how to react. But then, out of nowhere, Emma lowered her voice and kissed me. She sighed deeply, her body trembling with the weight of everything. "I need a break," she whispered, almost as if saying the words out loud made them real. It was a relief in some ways, but it was also a crushing moment, a realization that we were both slowly unraveling from the inside out. And then, as if by instinct, I suggested something familiar, something we used to do before everything fell apart. "Let's go camping," I said. We used to camp all the time when we first started dating. It was our escape, our way of getting away from the chaos. A weekend in nature, away from the phone calls, away from the constant reminders of the nightmare we were living in, sounded like the perfect plan. Without hesitation, Emma agreed, and before I knew it, we were packing our bags. But as I ran downstairs to grab our camping gear, everything came to a halt. The basement door creaked open, and a thick, nauseating cloud of rot hit me. It was the smell of rotten eggs mixed with something moldy, sour, and foul. My stomach turned as I stepped inside, my senses assaulted by the stench. I couldn't remember leaving anything down there that could have gone bad. Certainly not anything that could have caused this kind of foulness. Despite the overwhelming urge to run back upstairs, I forced myself to take a step inside, determined to get to the bottom of it. My first priority was to find the light switch, to illuminate whatever had caused this hideous smell, to stop it before it spread further through the house. But when I flicked the switch, I was confronted by something even worse. The light flickered on, casting harsh illumination over the entire basement. It revealed the source of the putrid stench, the disgusting, vile mess that had been allowed to rot in the corner. I froze. The air felt thick, suffocating, and it took a few moments for my mind to process what my eyes were seeing. And when it did, the shock hit me like a tidal wave. My body went numb, and for a second, I thought I might collapse. There, in the far corner, was a body. A body I should never have seen, not in this condition, not like this. It was Diana, or what was left of her. The girl we had been desperately searching for, the girl I had once tried to help. Her body was bloated, distended, the skin a sickening mix of black and blue, like something pulled from a nightmare. Maggots squirmed between the folds of flesh, feeding on what was left of her. She was barely recognizable. Her torn jacket, once a vibrant red, was now stained and shredded, slashed in places as if someone had carved into her with careless abandon. The fabric clung to her decaying form like a shroud. The cuts deep and jagged, as if the mutilation was done in a frenzy, a blind rage. It was as if someone had savaged her. And then, the most chilling detail of all, her mother's favorite kitchen knife. The very knife I had seen countless times in her mother's hands was lodged deep into Diana's eye socket. It was almost as if the act had been too personal, too intimate. The knife was buried in her skull, the blood that should have been spilled long gone, leaving behind a macabre, dried-up mess. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My thoughts were swirling into chaos, and nothing made sense. How? Why? What the hell had happened here? Was this really Diana? How had she ended up here, in the basement? The questions piled on top of each other, but my mind was too foggy to find the answers. The basement, which had once been a simple storage space, now felt like the tomb of all my worst nightmares. I wanted to scream, to run, to get away from the horror before me, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't take my eyes off the grotesque sight. I wanted to scream, but my voice was lost, swallowed up by the thick, suffocating air of the room. Diana was gone. She had been gone for months, but this was the proof that I had hoped never to find. The truth had been waiting in the darkness, festering, and now it had come to light in the most horrific way imaginable. I should have done something sooner. I should have seen the signs. I should have known. But now, it was too late. And whatever dark forces were at work here, whatever twisted path had led us to this, I didn't know if we'd ever find a way to escape from it.
Stories may end, but the fear remains. Subscribe to uncover more secrets hidden in the darkness. Until we meet again in the world of nightmarish shadows.